I'm here with Suzanne Steensen. She's a Senior Policy Analyst and Manager for Development Architecture and Global Governance at the OECD in Paris. Welcome to the German Development Institute.
Thank you, Matthias.
Suzanne, you're joining us today for the DIE conference on fragmentation or pluralism. And
Yes.
In a few words, why is the topic of the fragmentation of development cooperation so important?
Well, in my view, fragmentation and pluralism, this topic is important because it leads to ineffective development cooperation, where we see that uncoordination and unalignment of development cooperation increases the transaction cost of developing countries. And also, for instance, at the OECD, we've been doing a lot of work to monitoring the behaviors, and we actually see that half of the world's aid partnership only represent 5% of aid. So this is a very striking fact, telling that we need to do something.
You just mentioned some numbers and some framework conditions. So in your view, what are the opportunities and challenges associated with the fragmentation of development cooperation?
Well, in terms of challenges, we see that fragmentation is getting worse, and this is despite the fact that we have the political impetus from the Paris Declaration, from Accra, and from Busan, but there's no change in what we see in terms of fragmentation. And this is despite the fact that you can take different kinds of indicators and measure to look at fragmentation and all tell the same picture. So for us, this is a huge challenge and we need to address that. And the other challenge is that many developing countries, they actually value a lot of diversity. So that's a challenge, but others, they do complain about this diversity because it leads to too many transaction costs, as I mentioned earlier on.
So even with fragmentation increasing, and you mentioned Busan, you mentioned Accra, you mentioned Paris, how should development cooperation be organized in the future to reduce fragmentation?
I think one thing we've been learning over this past 5 years is that there's no one-size-fits-all. And I think the international community needs to really find a way to help the developing countries, in particular those with the least capacity to manage fragmentation, where fragmentation creates enormous transaction costs for them. And so this speaks to the need for helping them with capacity building to manage all the different new donors, including the traditional ones. So that's, I think, our recommendation, that we need to be very differentiated in our approach. And from the OECD, we'll be continuing to monitor and promote good practices among donors through our peer review mechanism that can help reduce this problem.
So good luck to the OECD with this process. Suzanne Steensen, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you.
here at the German Development Institute in Bonn.